Thank you for joining us for this webinar today. So let me just quickly introduce myself. I'm Rebecca, an associate lecturer at DAS Academy. I'm also a lead educational therapist, and I provide intervention in DAS learning centers in both literacy and numeracy. I would like to firstly welcome you to my webinar on organizing a disorganized child. So this is a topic that most of us would be interested in, as you may have encountered students who may seem a little cluttered, be it physically or mentally. If you are a teacher or a parent, that then you would be able to understand the challenges of teaching a child to be organized. Sometimes it feels like a full-time job, keeping track of class notes, schedules, and forms to be signed. Parents get tired of scrambling the night before a project is due, and teachers get tired of requests for extensions or the tears that come from yet another failed assignment. In many cases, students simply lack the organizational skills necessary to succeed in the classroom. But organizational skills aren't just about remembering deadlines. By teaching a child organization when they are young, teachers and parents actually set the child up to succeed as they grow. So organizational skills can have a direct impact on a young adult's ability to succeed in college and the workplace. So when a child is actually disorganized, he or she may look cluttered, okay, like these Lego blocks here, right? They have their thoughts, ideas all over the place. They may have fantastic ideas, but not able to make sense of them and put them in a sequence or order. As such, they would need a manual, right? So in other words, tools and appropriate strategies to organize all of this cluttered information and ideas in their mind so that they see a desirable output, just like this Lego model. So it is therefore vital to hand in the right manual to these learners, okay? And different manual is needed for different output, just like these Lego models. Based on the output, we can then choose the right strategies. Some basic principles to keep in mind when choosing the right tool: it has to be appropriate for the learner. It has to be easy to follow so that the learner doesn't lose interest or attention. It has to be visual so that it makes it easier for them to retain it in their memory as well. Now, organizational skills is actually one of the executive function skills. Let me explain a little on what executive function, EF in short, is. Okay? So executive function is actually a set of mental skills that all have to do with managing multiple streams of information and one's resources in order to achieve a goal. So these are actually skills that help us understand what activities or tasks we will pay attention to and which activity we will choose to do. So it allows us to organize our behavior, override short-term demands in favor of longer-term goals. So what you see here are some of the EF skills. We need these skills to perform day-to-day tasks and achieve our goals. For instance, to complete a piece of homework. Now, successful development of executive function is actually critical to both academic success and general success in life. But how is it linked to homework? So I'm going to demonstrate to you. Okay? The nature of homework inherently lends itself to an easy way to teach and improve executive function skills. Homework allows kids, right, to practice planning and organizing steps. There are many steps involved in managing daily homework assignments. It is not as simple as it seems to us. The learner needs to have a good working memory in order to work with information without losing track of what they are doing. They need to also organize their thoughts and materials. For instance, to do this math homework, what are the materials needed? How much time is needed? Which homework should the learner start with, and etc. They need to also put all the distraction aside and work on the homework. That's called response inhibition. They need to ask themselves questions and analyze their own thinking. That is, metacognition is needed. Okay? In a situation where a problem arises when completing the piece of homework, for example, the child does not have a measuring instrument to complete the task, they need to have flexible thinking to think of a different way to complete it. Sometimes homework can be really tough. They need to have good emotional control to stay on the task and not give up easily. Okay? Besides that, they need to also have the motivation to get started on the homework, that is task initiation. For those who may have difficulties to do so, might make them appear to be lazy or unmotivated. There's only so much time left for homework and all other things to be completed before bedtime. Therefore, managing the time well is crucial. Students with poor EF might have trouble with managing time. For example, they may end up spending 2 hours on math and realize that they do not have enough time to complete other homework. This may lead them to having difficulties to pay attention and manage distractions. With poor planning and prioritizing, they may feel overwhelmed with too many tasks in hand. And of course, focusing and sustaining their attention to complete the task and to meet the objective is necessary. Now you can see how EF skills are key in completing a simple task like homework. It could be anything. And a child with poor EF skills would have great difficulties meeting objectives and completing tasks. So in my webinar today, I'll be focusing on 3 essential executive function skills specifically to support a disorganized child: organization, planning, and time management. Okay? Now, a child with a disorganized mind would have his ideas, thoughts, emotions, information all over the place. He may not have a structure, may seem to miss out on main ideas or points, and also seem very lost. So this leads to several other difficulties, such as meeting deadlines, completing homework or exam papers, organizing and sequencing ideas and concepts in, like, for instance, speaking and writing as well. So when they are reading a text, you sometimes have to reorganize the information in your head. They may also lack self-monitoring skills. Now, self-monitoring requires students to be mindful of what the task is, how they are approaching the task, as well as the outcome of their effort. Self-monitoring is also the ability to assess yourself. So it means understanding the external standards and seeing if you have met them. So it's knowing your own strengths and weaknesses. It's the ability to make your own corrections by noticing when things are going wrong and figuring out the solutions. And self-monitoring combines a lot of different skills, which is why it can be incredibly challenging. It involves a lot of working memory, like what were the expectations, right? And it involves comparison skills, like how am I matching up to them? Time management, how often and when should I be reviewing my work? It also requires planning and organizational skills, like how do I build editing and review time into my schedule? And emotional regulation skills too, like how can I troubleshoot if I get frustrated? Where am I emotionally? And so on and so forth. So one of the things that's particularly challenging about self-monitoring is that there aren't very many suggestions for making it easier except to practice. However, there are some ways that you can intentionally practice using self-monitoring that will hopefully guide you and remind you. I'll share some of these strategies later. So a child with poor self-monitoring skills may have difficulties in checking or correcting work, keeping track of goals and objectives, and also selecting the best strategies for specific tasks. So therefore, the question now is, how do we then help these learners? Okay. So we can start by creating a routine. Now, familiar activities can provide comfort for both adults and children during challenging and uncertain times. Just like adults, children feel more confident and secure when their daily activities are predictable and familiar. A consistent daily schedule and a step-by-step routine actually give children a predictable day. So I'm going to share some basic principles to help your learner create a routine. So in the routine, you need to pencil in essentials. These are equivalently, or rather more important to a child's mental and physical well-being. It should not be disregarded when creating a routine. So the child needs to know that their personal time and space are also important. So you need to factor in sleep, school, family, as well as exercise time. With adequate sleep, children are able to have a fresher mind and therefore able to perform better. They also need to understand the time allocated for school so that it is part of their routine and they do not struggle to get ready or be prepared for it. Family time is vital. This is the time that the child gets to bond, share, and learn with the family members. This is where they feel safe and know that they are important. This is needed to also boost their self-esteem and confidence too. Now, exercise helps children to not only stay healthy physically, but also have a fresh and a healthy mind. So exercise can come in any form and time should be allocated each day so that it becomes part of their lifestyle. Try to develop regular bedtime routine, for instance, brushing teeth, reading a book, or listening to a song. before tucking them to bed. So this refreshes the mind and the child has a higher chance of having an undisrupted and quality sleep time. So which is vital in how they perform the following day as well. Okay. It's also important to allocate time for homework and revision. So you could create a checklist like this or a timetable with very clear visuals so that the child is able to follow. You need to indicate the time, the duration clearly and state what they are required to do. It has to be very explicit. You could also allocate a specific place in the house for the child to do homework and revision. And this space that you choose has to have limited distractions. Keep that space organized and well equipped with the essentials. Like for instance, all the writing materials that are needed, the papers, calculators, anything that's needed for them to complete the task, so that the child doesn't lose his or her focus finding those items while trying to work on the main task, which is to complete the homework or revision. Very importantly, plan for breaks. Breaks are very important to give the brain time to divert from the task and to refresh it before coming back to work on it. So physical activity allows your brain, right, to consolidate learning better. So you could include some movement activities like playing the dartboard, doing a hopping game, all right, a simple yoga, anything that the learner has interest in. And the main purpose of the activity is to help learners to recharge and come back to the main task. Very important, commit to your plan. A plan with no commitment becomes meaningless. Consistency is key. Get them to be present and to stay focused. The start of a routine is always a challenge. However, as they keep doing it, it becomes a habit and therefore it becomes effortless. It is important to support the child to develop it to a habit. Routine helps young learners feel secure and tell them what to expect next. It gets them ready for learning. Having a routine can be helpful in times of unpredictability, uncertainty, and stress. Implementing a structure to your day can give you a sense of control. It can also help improve your focus, organization, and productivity. Now, a lack of structure and routine can actually exacerbate feelings of distress and make you pay more attention to the source of your problems. So if people don't have structure and are actually sitting around with less to focus on, then they also probably will find themselves thinking about the stressful situation more, which can also lead to additional stress and anxiety. Okay. Now, what you see on the screen is a sample of a homework planning and contract. Now, at the very basic, to help learners to stay organized in completing their homework, we could firstly help by setting a homework routine accompanied with an incentive system. So firstly, what they can do is you can describe the problematic behavior. So it could be if they have a difficulty to get started on a task, or if they are avoiding the task, or they are getting distracted by unimportant things, or even the environment. Okay, so you need to describe the problematic behavior, set a goal to overcome the problematic behavior. You then find a location at home or school that is conducive for homework to be done. So it would be good to actually stick to the same location as I mentioned earlier, as our aim is to develop routine. Changes itself could be a distraction. You can then establish a homework schedule. You can actually decide on possible rewards and penalties. So this has to be discussed with the learner so that they take ownership in doing so and they feel motivated. You can then write a homework contract so that you could use that to reflect on the effectiveness of the routine and see how it impacts their learning. So it is a good way for learners to keep track of their progress as well. It is important for them to take responsibility for their actions. Okay. Now, explicit systems and strategies are actually important for teaching organization of materials. So you need to be very explicit and consistent in helping them to organize their materials. So having very clear markings on files and organizers, you can actually use the multiple folders for school to separate homework into the different subjects. You can also consider getting like small drawers to store the various stationery. Ensure that all the necessary supplies are there. You might want to consider separating school stationery and homework stationery. To emphasize on the point, if let's say something is missing, right, students will just be walking around looking for the stationery, which may cause them to lose the momentum and their routine is actually disrupted. So they may use it as also an excuse to escape from their work to procrastination, right? So this eventually will lead them to not completing the given task. Okay, so you can also color code the corners of worksheets so that it's visual and easy for learners to plan and organize, right? So I would advise you to do this together with the learner so that they are clear of how the respective files or folders or things are actually organized around them. You can consider a cut the clutter day, all right? Okay, so cut the clutter day, you can actually go through your child's backpack like once a week. So what you need to get them to do is to empty everything out, empty all the contents out, sort everything into the save and the don't save pile. Okay, so the don't save pile are whatever additional stuff that they have taken, draft papers, used papers, whatever that they don't need it. So you can get them to throw them away. Then you sort the save pile by subject, unfinished work, as well as you can create a other pile, which means it needs a little more review to sort them out further. Then you can put each subject pile into a folder or notebook to organize it. You decide what to do with the other pile together with the learner by asking them questions like, do you need these? How often do you use it? Is it necessary? How else can you organize it? Then what you do is you put all the needed materials back into the backpack. Okay, so you can call it the operation clean out. It is important to develop this into a habit. Therefore, I would emphasize on the need to adopt the I do, we do, then you do yourself approach. So we eventually want our learners to be independent. Therefore, modeling it to them first, which is like I do, followed by doing it together. So we do it together. So what at the we do stage is more like the child is doing it while I'm actually guiding the child. And eventually to get them to do it on their own is important because we want them to be independent eventually. So it is progressive. Perhaps providing the learner with a checklist might help to develop self-monitoring skills. So the checklist could include points like what needs to be thrown, what needs to be refilled, or reminders on important or essential items that needs to be packed. Okay. Now, this is, I'm going to introduce you to a very simple study strategy. So for some students, after lessons, they may have difficulties to review their notes or to retain information in their memory. Perhaps they lack the structure, they are not sure how to organize whatever that they have learned for that day in the classroom. So it's a very, very simple strategy. It's called 10-24-7. You can get the learner to write the notes 10 minutes after the class because it's all fresh in their memory, right? So it will be good for them to write notes, rewrite the notes 10 minutes just after the class and merge it with the assignments or assessments that's given to them. Then get them to review the notes one day after the class to see whether they still have it in their memory. Okay, then you review the notes again 7 days later. And with that, you can get them to have a peer discussion to share with each other. These help learners to retain new information in their memory. In order to do so, they need to organize new information. So what you can do is you can consider providing templates as shown here in this slide to help learners to consolidate their notes. They probably need that structure, right? So you can provide them the template. So the template shown here is Cornell's T method. You could provide visual cues and helping words for learners to consolidate their notes in an orderly manner. So for some students, they may find it very difficult to take down notes, too much of information, and they are not very good in multitasking. So giving them some helping words, fill in the blank kind of note-taking templates would really help them to keep track of their learning. Okay. All right. Time management. Now, time management is another important skill that students need to develop. Managing time effectively enables students to become more confident and organized and learn more efficiently. Effective time management skills are particularly essential for students of all ages. It should be explicitly taught to younger learners and eventually become a habit when they are perhaps in secondary school. Now, time management techniques can help students be on track and cope with the stress of added responsibilities. However, many children may not yet understand increments of time, so adding the visual component is actually key. So when you say, wait 2 more minutes, you might as well have said, wait 2 more hours. For some children, because they are still learning about units of time. So there are certain apps that actually help students to have this visual these visual timers that help students to keep track of time, which is more visual. The Time Timer app is one of the apps. Okay, it can be easily downloaded on Android and Apple, and it's a classic classroom staple. It actually visually counts down the time, and you can add an audible ding when the timer is actually done. Okay, so you could also consider hourglass and timers. They come in intervals of 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2, 3, 5, and 10 minutes. So it's great that they're actually color-coded. And these are also great because they're very quiet and you can use it in any time of the class without distracting anybody else in the classroom. Okay, so visual timers are really very important, especially for younger learners, for them to keep track of the time. Okay, and it's also very important when it comes to assessment, because assessments are actually timed, right? For some learners, they lack this time management skill, and that's probably because they don't understand the concept of time, and therefore this is a great way to actually help them to get started. Okay, so you could also use a working clock. So you want to help students to actually visualize the time allocated for the task. So what you can do here, okay, so if you actually observe my clock there, you can actually use 2 whiteboard markers of different colors. Okay, then you use one color to mark the time needed to complete the task, as what I've shown here. Okay, so that's the entire yellow thing is the amount of time that's needed to complete the task. Then you use the other color to mark the halfway point of the duration. Okay, and then you can ask students to take note of the time and think, like, am I halfway done? If not, how much more time do I need? Do I need to adjust the time that I need? So this is actually also a very good opportunity to teach students the concept of time. Okay, so many students, they are unable to manage their time because they lack the understanding of the concept of time as well. Okay, so this is very visual, really helps them to understand what is exactly 5 minutes, what exactly is 10 minutes, how long do I have, and they get enough practice before they are really sitting in for timed assessments as well. Okay, now, developing self-monitoring skills, as I said, is essential in developing an independent child. So these are just some examples of how you could help your child develop their self-monitoring skills. You can tap on technology, right? Gadgets, get them to use, get them to set reminders to either complete tasks or to monitor the progress of tasks. Like Google Calendars, smart watches, or even alarm clocks could help learners to keep track of what they are required to do. So you need to be very explicit in that. Now, visual schedules are also very helpful for learners, especially younger learners, to monitor and manage time to complete tasks. It helps them to understand the sense of time. You could color code the clock, as I showed, in blocks of 10 minutes or 5 minutes, depending on the learner. This helps the learner to understand the concept of time, as I said, and to manage their time according to that. Okay, and a homework timesheet, as shown over here, is also another visual tool that help learners to keep track of their routine or to-do tasks. So you could again tap on technology. There are templates or apps that are readily available. You could also create like one using an Excel sheet, or it could be also as simple as just using a whiteboard or A3 drawing block with tables and checkboxes, whichever that suits you and the learner as well. But I think most important is consistency to get them to do it on their own as well. Okay. Now, when you're faced with a very big task, it helps if you break the task down into smaller and more manageable parts. Now, a lot of procrastination happens when the student is actually looking at a big task. Like you give an entire text to read, the student actually procrastinates because they feel that it's so tedious to actually read such a long text, and they end up not getting started on the task. Okay, so by actually breaking down the task into more manageable parts, actually helps them to cope with it better. So this will help them to avoid stress and procrastination. Try breaking down all tasks into tiny fragments that you can complete in 20 to 30 minutes or less. So you focus on one small task at a time without any distractions. Okay, breaking a goal into smaller steps makes it mentally manageable. Working memory is limited, so we cannot think about several things at once. So students trying to write an essay or to solve an equation may be feeling very overwhelmed. So we need to break it down. It allows students to concentrate on one challenge at a time. It's less taxing for working memory. Breaking goals into smaller steps makes them easier for students to comprehend as well. So the Pomodoro technique, which is shown on the table on my right, is a time management system that encourages people to work with the time that they have rather than against it. So the basic steps are they choose a single task to focus on, they set a timer for 25 minutes and work only on the selected task. So after 25 minutes, they take a 5-minute break. They repeat steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 times. So they take a longer break of about 15 to 30 minutes after that cycle is done. So using the Pomodoro method, you break your workday into 25-minute focus periods, followed by 5-minute breaks. So each of these focus periods plus a break period is called a Pomodoro, which is named after the tomato-shaped timer, which was first used to test this method. Okay, so it helps students to stay focused during that period of time. And while they're staying focused, they're actually just focusing on that activity that's given to them. And they take that break. So that mental break really helps them to refresh and then come back to the task again for the next block of 25 minutes. So it doesn't seem very overwhelming for students, especially when they're given lots of homework and lots of tasks to complete within the day. Okay, so in a way, you're also helping them to manage their time. Okay, now while trying to develop a routine, it is important to get learners to make decisions on their own. So a child may have many different activities or things to complete within a day, which may be from school, home, and even personal agenda. Now, with all these demands, they need to be able to plan, prioritize, and organize things. Now, this framework helps learners to do those. Okay, so the Eisenhower matrix, also referred to as an urgent important matrix, helps you decide on and prioritize tasks by urgency and importance. Now, sorting out less urgent and important tasks which you should either delegate or not do at all. So there are actually 4 quadrants. Now, the first one is the do first quadrant, which is an urgent and important task. These include things with clear deadlines and consequences for not taking immediate action, like finishing a project, submitting a draft assignment. Okay, most often, these are either things that were sprung on you from an external source or things that you put off until faced with a looming deadline. Now, either way, they require a crisis mode response. So the tasks in this quadrant are inevitable. They are very important. You cannot avoid it. So you have to prioritize whichever task that comes into this quadrant. Okay, the next one is schedule, which includes not urgent but important tasks. Now, these are activities that help you achieve long-term goals. These may not have a deadline or even an end date, so it is easy to put them off in favor of more urgent tasks. However, these tasks have a much greater effect on your long-term effectiveness in like completing your goals. Okay, and the next quadrant is delegate. It can be replaced with do it later, especially for children. So these are actually urgent but unimportant tasks. These include things that need to be done but don't require your specific skills. And these are tasks often based on expectations set by others and do not move you closer to your long-term goals. Like, for example, unnecessary interruption from friends, checking your phone or email whenever it goes off, or responding to certain text, emails, or social media messages. Okay, and the last quadrant is avoid. As the name suggests, these are things that are neither urgent nor important. It includes distractions that make you feel worse afterwards. So can be okay, but only when it's done in moderation. And these activities don't contribute to progress on your goals, but can actually end up taking over large chunks of time. So this includes like, watching TV for hours, mindlessly refreshing social media and scrolling, avoidance of activities such as, sorting and organizing email rather than answering it, or even excessive shopping or online browsing. Okay, so this will actually come under the avoid matrix. So how can you actually implement it with your learners? So what you can do is you get your child, right, the students, to actually list down all the things to do. So it includes their personal things that they need to do, like even replying to WhatsApp messages, watching TV shows, and as well as finishing math homework, more important stuff like finishing math homework, beginning on an assignment. Please get them to list down everything that they are supposed to do. So there's, in a way, they know that these are all the things that they're required to do. Then give them the matrix and get them to allocate each task to the respective quadrant. This could be done by writing it on Post-its and pasting it on the board. Then for each task, get them to set a goal to complete it. Okay, so a task and without any goal or aim, it becomes very redundant, right? So get them to set goal to complete it. Now you could create a checklist where you indicate the task, the time, and other details that are necessary to achieve the goal. All right, so in that way, the students, the child feels that they are taking ownership They are the one planning this out in a way. In the beginning stage, when you're actually doing this with your students, right, it becomes it's actually very tedious because you're actually taking through each of the tasks together with them, right? So you have to probably guide them in every step of the way. But eventually it becomes a habit, all right? So until then, we probably got to handhold students. Okay. Now, I'm going to share with you some examples of how you could help develop self-monitoring skills. The very first one is self-talk. Now, encourage learners to speak aloud when they're planning. So self-talk actually promotes reflection and greater awareness of one's learning and performing process. So encourage students to think aloud, model this behavior by talking through your own checklist, reviewing and revising plans, and discussing how to avoid errors. So this also helps to develop metacognition, to think about your own thinking. So when I'm actually with my students in the classroom, when I'm actually talking through a process, so let's say I'm trying to solve a word problem with my students, I talk through the process. So, I ask questions. So the question says that there's more over here. So I think we are dealing with a ratio question here. You think aloud with the questions with the students, and you encourage the students to do the same so that you understand where they are coming from, and then you can actually come in to actually help them to correct their thinking as well. Self-monitoring checklists, provide self-monitoring checklists to help learners to be more independent and to take ownership. So here are some examples of checklists that you can create, like what I've shown here, right? Let's say it could be specific to a subject. It could be perhaps you are actually getting the student to check their writing. So what are some things that they need to take note of once they're done writing? All right. You could also create like work strips as shown here. So work strips actually are actually visual checklists. So you get students to write a task that needs to be done on each note. Then you discuss together the order of task completion. So you're getting them to, in a way, prioritize the task. And then you get the student to remove one note when each task is completed. So in a way, it's very visual. Once every task is done, they know that they are removing it. They see that it's getting reduced, and they get a kind of satisfaction. Okay. Now, self-monitoring. Some tips that I would also give specifically for assessment. What I do is with my learners, I actually analyze their assessment papers, and I actually try to identify 3 top errors that the students make. So most of the students, once they have completed their assessment, right, they are not sure what to look out for or what exactly they are checking. So they just flip through the pages. They see that they have answered all the questions. They put it aside and they say, I'm done checking the paper. But what you could do, the additional layer of help, is to give them the structure. Like, what exactly are you looking out for in the assessment paper once you've completed it? So I give them the top 3 hits, meaning I get them to identify the top 3 errors. I identify the top 3 errors that they make in the assessment paper. So be it for math, English, whichever subject that they're doing, I identify the top 3 errors that they make. And what the students will do is they will just write this down in the beginning of the paper, and they know that at the end of the paper, once they have completed, these are the 3 things that they need to go and check. So for example, if the child keeps making calculation error, okay, so I will tell them, okay, you always tend to make careless errors in calculation. I want you to go back once you're done with the paper to go and look out for all the calculation error. Or the child keeps missing out units, writing the units, and that actually, they deduct marks for that. So I'll tell them, okay, once you've done the paper, I want you to go back and look out to make sure that you have written the units for all the questions. All right, so these are some, you're actually giving them a structure for them to do a self-check. Okay, so you're actually also helping them to improve self-monitoring skills. All right. Okay, so in summary, okay, I would like to emphasize some of the points that I've shared earlier to develop executive function skills. Okay, so you need to actually model, rehearse, and practice and review skills to have consistency and to develop it to a habit. So repeated performance of a behavior is what makes it a habit. Once the behavior is automatic, then the burden is actually lifted from the executive system. So the initial stage of getting them to do it might seem very tedious, right? Might seem very dreadful, but what happens is by modeling it to them, by rehearsing it, and by practicing it, it becomes a routine. It becomes a habit. Okay. Notice and encourage the child's effort and successes along the way so that the child feels motivated to continue the positive behavior. Okay, we want to encourage the learners, and we want them to feel good about what they're doing. So be very encouraging, have the growth mindset. So don't just look at the end product, but rather look at the progress. So the little progress, like, I realized that like simple things like, even though the child gets the question wrong still, right? If let's say there are certain things that the child has done better, I would recognize it. For instance, if the child has been having a very disorganized way of presenting the answers, okay, and eventually the child actually writes step 1, step 2, step 3 and writes it, but the end product is still wrong, right? I would still recognize that, hey, I realized that you have now, listed down the steps neatly in an organized manner. I think that's a great improvement. Now you have got step 1 correct. Now let's look where you went wrong. So that's a growth mindset. You're actually recognizing the process rather than the product itself. Okay. Teach the child to evaluate their progress by developing their self-monitoring skills. So what you could do is, you could use like visual cues or verbal prompts, like, how am I doing? How is this going? What could I have done differently? So you want them to be more reflective in their learning, all right? And in a way, you are helping them to think of, to analyze their strengths and weaknesses and to work on it. Okay, be their frontal loop until mastery is well established, as they might struggle until those skills become embedded as part of their life. So at first, your executive function is really busy figuring out how it's done. That's the part of your brain involved with conscious decision making and planning. But once you're proficient, the prefrontal cortex, the part where it's where it controls the executive function, it gets a break. So in fact, it's actually freed up by as much as 90%. You can now perform that skill automatically, leaving your conscious mind to focus on other things. Okay, and fade out support gradually so that your child becomes more independent and confident. So emphasizing on the point that I made earlier, I do, we do, and you do. So the initial stage is a lot of hand holding. Then slowly, with a little bit of with little bit of supervision and facilitation, and eventually you want the learner to be more independent. Okay, but for some learners, how long is it going to take? It really depends on the ability of the learner. Okay, so this is where a lot of the tools that I actually shared earlier would actually come in very handy, like checklists, apps to automate reminders, calendars, timetable. All this becomes a very, very helpful tool, okay, to help learners. All right. Okay, so I've come to the end of my webinar, right? I only shared as much, but there's so much more that I can cover in terms of executive function, all right? But before I open up for Q&A, all right, I would like to quickly share with you some courses that might interest you, all right? We are actually very proud to let you know that the 7 of our DAS Academy courses are now Skills Future Credit eligible, and one of which is Executive Function course. And there's one upcoming course, which is Educational Psychology, okay, which will start end of April. So you can actually scan the QR code here if you are interested to find out more and to have a more in-depth understanding of executive function. Okay, and also you can, there are other courses that may be relevant to you. So it might be helpful for you to actually, go and check out these courses. All right. So I'm going to leave this screen on for a while. Let me look at the Q&A. Okay, so I have a question on someone who actually forgot about missed out on metacognition. So metacognition is really about thinking about your own thinking. It's really to when you're working on something, it's really to think of, okay, am I going on the right track? If I'm not, okay, what other alternatives do I have? So it's really to analyze your own thinking. So that's metacognition, and that's what we want to develop in our learners as well. Okay. Okay, so Linda, you actually raised your hand earlier. You actually indicated in your Q&A chat that easy to follow visual. Would you mind explaining that a little more in your chat? Then I can answer that as well. I'm not sure which part you actually missed.
Oh no.
Okay, but
hi.
don't. Yes, hi Linda.
Yeah, no, it's just the second slide. I missed it. You mentioned that we must always have a manual, and the manual must be easy to follow, visual, and there's another point I didn't catch it, so I just want to check.
Oh, okay. So I get it. Okay, so let me go to that slide so that you can have a look at it. Okay, so it
Yes,
must
yes,
be
yes.
visual and appropriate for the learner. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Don't worry, this session is recorded and it will be uploaded in our website as well. So if you have missed out on any part of the session today, you can actually go back to the video and watch it again. Okay,
I
the
see.
recording.
Thanks. Thanks.
Yes. No problem. Okay, so I have a few more questions that are coming in. All right, so let me just answer them. Just give me a minute. Okay, so let me look at the, so while I'm actually answering the question, you can actually also provide your feedback to us by scanning the QR code as well. Okay, so I have a question here. How young should we start our kid on organizing skill? All right, so I would think as early as possible, if you can, even at preschool age or even nursery, at their nursery level, 3-4 years old, you can already start organizational skills, like even as simple as sorting out toys. So if you're looking at very young learners, preschool learners, you can actually get them to sort out toys. So ask them, how do you think you want to organize this? So we start with something that's more relevant to them, and it eventually becomes a habit. Okay, so they see that, oh, this is how you organize things. And once you start with that, eventually they will see that, in order for me to complete a task, I need to have organizational skills. And that actually leads on to, like, even when it comes to reading, when it comes to writing, in terms of organizing their thoughts. So even your verbal instructions to them, you could actually, model it to them by saying, okay, I want you all to do this. Now, step 1, I want you to do this first. Step 2, step 3. So in a way, you're actually already preparing the child to be organized, and you're already helping them to see how to do that. Okay. So that answers the question for Pauli. Okay, Abigail asked the question, do you have any tips on helping a child to keep calm and regulate emotion? Okay, he melts down. Okay, so it's actually a very, very common problem, right? And a lot of my students' parents have actually shared with me as well that to get started on the task itself is actually very difficult. It also depends on the age level of the children. So what we could do is perhaps the task itself could cause anxiety for the learner. So if you are just going to say that this is what we are going to do, the child might actually have a meltdown. So perhaps you want to repackage it. I would say repackage it because you put it in a way that it's not so scary for the child, right? It will really help the child to calm themselves down and be active, actively participate in the activity. So for example, if you want the child to actually do a reading activity, now ease them into that activity. So you can talk about the topic. You can say, let's do you want to learn more about dinosaurs? I'm actually quite interested. So don't tell them that we are going to read a book now, but rather ease them into the activity by talking about the topic, getting them, or even breaking the task down into smaller parts and tell them, okay, we're going to spend about 10 minutes doing this. I'm going to be doing it with you. So give them the assurance in order to avoid that meltdown. So really need to understand the situation, find out what exactly is triggering the child to have that meltdown before you work on it. Okay? All right, so Abigail, I hope I answered your question. Okay, so there's this question, will using this method eventually normalize a child from his or her cognitive fitness? Okay, so this is actually a very, very broad question. So the child may have a lot of, may have many strengths and weaknesses. So firstly, to be able to understand the child, I'm not too sure what you mean by normalizing the child, but I think what all these strategies that I've shared is really to support the child, not really to, I wouldn't say normalize, it's really to support the child and to cope with that the deficit, the difficulty that the child is actually facing. Okay, so it's if the child, that, okay, my child has all these fantastic ideas when it comes to writing, but having that structure is where the child has difficulties. So this is where I will use all these tools, be it digital tools or templates or organizers to help the child to organize. So firstly, to understand the strength of the child, then identify what is it that the child really has difficulties in, and then hand these tools to the child so that he's able to cope with the difficulty. Okay. Okay, so another question, When you mentioned you need to put a child in a room with no distractions, can a child share the study area with another parent or kid? Yeah, as I said, there's no restriction, there's no hard or fast rule about where you place the child. But I think the bottom line is you need to understand what exactly distracts the child. For some children, I realize that some students that I provide intervention, they can they study better with a light music playing at the background, while it distracts some children very badly. Okay, flickering light can distract some students, but for some students, they don't even notice that flickering light. So really depends on the learner. If another parent or kid is in the room and it's causing a distraction to the child, then I would think of an alternative, perhaps thinking of a particular time that the child can use the room with no distraction. Yeah, so you might want to try to understand that from the child's perspective first. Okay, so another question, what a typical day will look like to include the things you mentioned? Creating many checklists and visuals sounds like a lot of planning. Okay, so again, be very focused on what exactly you are working with the child on. Okay, what exactly do you want the child to do? So you don't work on too many objectives at the same time. Look at what, so again, prioritizing. What do you think the child needs help in? Okay, if the child is having great time, great difficulties to even get started on task, then you focus on that task and see what exactly is stopping them to do so. So anything that you want to work with the child, right, it's really important to understand what is triggering that action, the behavior. Okay, so look at what's triggering that behavior and see how or what tools are necessary in order to support the learner. Okay, so let me give you a very simple example. If the child is having difficulties to unpack the bags and pack the bag and always forgets things to bring it to school, this, in a way, disorganized, right? Keep saying forgot. So perhaps you want to look at what is the checklist that you want to give in order for the child. So the checklist is as simple as just having a board. So what I do for my own children, I have in a simple paper, a blank piece of paper. I write down the things that I want them to take note of. I just laminate it and I just give it to them. So what they do is they just use these erasable markers to check it. And they know that these are some things that they need to place it in the bag before leaving for school. And these are some things that they need to do when they're doing a particular task. So it could be as simple as, okay, when I'm actually, when before bedtime, these are some things that I need to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3. So really try to understand the child and then think of what is exactly relevant to the child's needs as well. Okay. Okay, there's another question. Child has task avoidance behavior when writing compo. So how do I break the task? Write a paragraph or a subtask. Okay, so again, this is a very broad topic, but let me just give a very, very simple tip. Okay, so when writing composition, some children, I have students who don't even want to start on a single word, okay, because they feel that I need to write a lot. I don't know. The question is like, whenever I ask them to, get started, they'll say, I don't know. And they just have no motivation. So I think when the main idea to writing is really to help make them feel motivated to start writing. So you can tap on some online digital tools. Okay, like there's this digital tool that's called Story Creator. Okay, I can share it with you all as well. Okay, just I will get my colleague to share on the link for the story writing app. Okay, it's called Story Creator. Book Creator, sorry. Okay, so it's called Book Creator. Okay, so what you can do is based on the topic that you're actually working on the child, you can actually, that the book creator helps them to actually create the characters there, get them to organize. So they have these organizers in the app itself. So tap on digital tools that actually help with the writing activity. Number 2, I think it's also important for them to understand the topic. Some students, they have got no idea where to get started because they're not familiar with the topic. So perhaps getting them to watch a video or having a conversation, oracy activity to get them familiarize themselves with the topic, giving them some samples, writing of that topic before they get started. So start from like planning stage, so there should be always 3 stages, like the pre-writing stage, the writing stage, and the post-writing stage. so that they need to feel motivated in order to write. So all these will actually come in place. So yeah, in that way, they will not feel overwhelmed when it comes to writing a composition. Okay, so another question, any suggestions on how to get an 8-year-old to have a more positive mindset towards learning? Okay, so as I mentioned again, when you mention homework for some students, it might be anxiety, and the anxiety could be due to various reasons. It could be the subject, it could be the classroom experience because of the subject, it could be lack of confidence. Okay, they're not very confident in doing it. They feel maybe it's like learned helplessness too, like they keep forgetting, they are always not doing well in that particular homework, and therefore they have no motivation to do. They feel that no matter what, I'm not going to get started, or too much of distractions. It could be anything. Okay, so I think a lot of encouragement is needed, modeling and hand holding. So what you could do is, as I shared earlier, sit with the child, try to understand what is that problematic behavior, okay, and then encourage them by, as I said, breaking down the task. So if let's say they have 3 pieces of homework to do within the day, so planning it out, giving them the assurance, helping them to manage the time, putting it down visually for them, helps them to get started on it. Okay, so you should really get started now itself, so that it eventually develops into a habit. So I think it's a great time to start. 8 years old, you can get started on it. So get them to give you all the homework, okay, and then list it down for them. Make it very visual. For some students, they are not able to see this, and tell them, okay, so how much time do you think you need for this particular homework? Okay, maybe this is a very, very long piece of homework, like maybe 10 questions. Let's break it down. Let's do 5 questions. Let's try to take about 20 minutes to do these 5 questions. Okay, I'm going to, let's do this for 20 minutes, and then reward them with something that they like. Maybe tell them, okay, you can play this for 5 minutes, and then come back to the next 5 questions. So try to find some kind of some motivation based on the child's interest, in order to get them started on the task and to complete the task. Okay, yes, right. So temptation bundling is another useful way to get started. All right, so yes, some examples is like bundling it with bubble tea and anything that the child likes. So tap on their interest. Try to make it exciting. So try to make it engaging for the learner, more interactive, so that they don't feel that homework is so dreadful. Okay, so breaking the task down is really, really helpful, and bundling it up with something that they feel motivated is also another way to get them to stay on the task. Okay. All right. So thank you, Mariam. My colleague has actually put the link for Book Creator on the chat as well. So you can actually go and explore that the website. So there are actually a lot of other websites, digital tools that are available too. So do go and explore them to help with the child. Okay, so there's another question. Your child has attention issue. What can help? So I think, again, this is a very, very broad question, because attention itself, there could be various reasons why the child isn't paying attention. It could be the environment. It could be maybe other factors that may affect their attention too. So I agree that attention is actually the very first step to learning. With no attention, there is no retention. So what we may want to do is, we may want to actually find what's the root cause of the problem. Why is the child not paying attention? Is it only in a particular setting, or is it generally in all settings the child is not paying attention? So if it's only a particular setting, then you want to find out what's the root cause of the problem. Generally, the child has difficulties to pay attention, then you may want to see what to actually get the child to pay attention to as well. Like, for example, if it's in the classroom, is it because the child is distracted by the environment? Is it because the child is unable to follow the instruction? Are the instructions too long for the child to follow? Is it because the instructions are all only auditory, no visual? So there are a lot of factors that actually that can affect attention. So trying to understand the child and identifying what exactly is causing that issue is important first, before we can actually provide the help. Okay. Okay, yes. Keep your questions coming. Right, I think I've answered most of the questions. Okay, to put in your questions, you can also put in your put it on the feedback, so you can actually scan the QR code to provide your feedback. I will also show you my email address here. My email address is here. So if you have any questions, if you have anything to share or need to, yeah, you can write in to me as well. My email address is there. Okay, and this session is recorded. So what you can do is you can actually go back to this recording again. Okay, it will be on our Facebook, on our social media as well as our website. So you can go and rewatch this recording if you have any questions. Okay, so Elijah has asked a very, very interesting question. Okay, when should the child be wind off? The do when reward method. So I think it shouldn't be always extrinsic reward. It should be intrinsic as well. So the child should feel motivated or should feel good about achieving something. So this is where we have the growth mindset. We try to adopt the growth mindset. The child needs to feel, we need to recognize the process. So that when the child is actually making progress, we need to be very specific in our praises too. So for example, as I mentioned, if the child is always very is very disorganized, okay, doesn't keep the learning materials properly. Just a very simple example, okay. But by recognizing when the child does it, that action, like suddenly, he or she starts to organize the material on the table. You recognize the effort and you say, hey, I realized that you today you actually arranged your books in an orderly manner, and I like it a lot. I think it's a great effort on your part. Excellent. So you're actually recognizing it's a very simple act of recognizing that action, so that the child would feel motivated to stay on the task. So I would really encourage more on the intrinsic reward. The extrinsic should be more for if let's say the child is really procrastinating, and once in a while the extrinsic reward could actually come in as well. So there's no hard or fast rule about when you should actually wind off. You should really go with the flow and with how the child responds to whichever method that you're using. Okay, so Linda asked, so far I have covered 3 executive function skills. So where can we learn the others? Okay, so we actually have a in-depth, we have a course on executive function. We have a cert course on executive function. It's a 15-hour course where we really go in depth in all the executive function skills. So you can actually, you can attend those courses to really have a better understanding of PF. All right. So if you have any questions, do put it in the chat. Okay, I'll be around for the next about at least 10 minutes. All right. If not, I've come to the end of the session. All right. Thank you for joining me today. Okay, if you have any questions, you can drop me an email. Okay, or you can actually rewatch this recording as well. Okay, thank you everyone for spending your lunchtime here. And I hope you managed to actually have some takeaways from this session as well. Linda, yes, to answer your question, the courses at the courses that we provide, we do address learners with ADHD as well. Yes, and there is a particular course specifically for ADHD learners. So there's a course on ADHD. It's one of the 7 courses that I shared earlier, the Skills Future Credit course that you can actually go and sign up for. Okay, so if you're looking specifically at ADHD, there's a course on that too. Okay, as to answer your question again, Linda, so as long the 7 courses that I mentioned, as long you're a Singapore citizen, you get a subsidy, a government subsidy of 70%, and you can also use your Skills Future credit to pay for the course. Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you, Linda. You too have a good day, and have a good day, everyone.